Hey, Father Michael here. I grew up in the city, and although it was certainly not a metropolis like Chicago or New York, it was urbanized in the sense that, there were sidewalks and streetlights and a downtown shopping district and a mall and all of that, at airport. Um, so it was not country living at all. When I was 5 and in kindergarten, I had a traumatic experience. We took a tour of a dairy farm outside the city limits, and although I do not remember many of the details, I remember how I felt afterwards. I remember how tired I was and that I wanted to make Kool-Aid, but we didn't have enough sugar. So that wasn't going to work because you need a cup of sugar to get your daily dose of diabetes. Um, and I remember how tired I was because we had done this tour in the morning and I was from the afternoon kindergarten. So I wasn't used to being up and about, before lunchtime. But most of all, the traumatic part of that little tour was I remember how dirty and smelly the whole experience was. Man, that is the closest I have ever been to a cow, and I do not need to repeat that experience for any reason. I even remember the farmer himself, and he seemed friendly enough to me, but man, he had dirty overalls and dirt on his hands, and his fingernails were dirty. It made me extremely thankful as a 5-year-old that God had not dropped me into a farming family in the middle of BFE, because I would not have survived the filth and the smell of poo every day. So fast forward 20 years, and I get this idea because, when you're a city person, you have this kind of pastoral illusion about living outside the city limits. And so I moved my young family outside the city limits to a house 15 miles out from the nearest grocery store. You could not get pizza or food delivered. There was no cable available. I mean, to me, that was living like, I don't know, on the frozen tundra, in northern Canada. You had to hike down the road to go pick up your mail at the little post office, where you also got your daily dose of dirt on your neighbor, because the postmistress was the source of all the dirt on everybody that you knew. There was only one service station where they ripped you off for every minor repair. There was only one little restaurant slash bar to go, and you had to basically drive 20 minutes to a half an hour to go anywhere. Even to go to work was like an hour. Well, the very first night there, I realized just how eerie living outside a city is. For one thing, it is crazy dark. You think you know what a dark night is, but you've got streetlights all around you, and then suddenly you have no streetlights. My God, it is dark and terrifying. And there are animal noises from animals you can't identify. That's when I started using a window fan to get to sleep, because it was so quiet. It was so quiet. It was intolerable and unnerving. On the plus side, though, There's always a plus side. There were nights, warm summer nights, without a moon, when I could go outside in the backyard and gaze up into the sky, and I saw things that I couldn't even explain at first. Stars and planets and things moving that I had no idea were even up there. I'd been living in the city, with a lot of man-made light pollution, as it's called. And the fact that, you're surrounded by artificial light at night means that we're not able to see absolutely everything there is to see directly above us in the sky. I remember many nights lying in the grass, after, of course, spraying the whole yard with Raid, because there's also a plethora of biting, stinging, crawling things out there. Lying on my back in the grass with young Christopher, looking up into the vast expanse of space. And I saw meteors and, shooting stars, what I would teach my kids were, that was the name. I would see satellites and distant galaxies and stars and planets that I hadn't seen before. Much of it I didn't even realize existed in this universe. And it's kind of an unsettling experience, because the deeper you stare into space, it feels like you're falling off the planet and just falling into an infinite dark space filled with stars and points of light. It was beautiful. It was unsettling. And I realized that although I had observed stars before, I'd been out at night, I knew what the moon was. I knew what the different phases of the moon looked like. But the truth was, until that point, I had only been seeing a fraction of what was there. And even in that moment of realizing how little I'd seen prior to that, it also occurred to me that I'm only seeing one view of the sky from the northern hemisphere, and there's a whole globe surrounded by equally mysterious and powerful and engaging sights directly above that I will never see. So there were a couple of lessons, I think, a couple of takeaways from that whole experience. The first is, we are human beings. And although we do have our individual spirituality and our spiritual experiences that we have when we are praying or engaging in meditation or walking the dog in the woods or listening to AC/DC, with our headphones, or riding the bike along the River Greenway, whatever spiritual practice looks like for you, we will never see or experience the totality of what there is to see. It's just never going to happen. Only God can see the whole picture. So what is true of the night sky is also true of our lives. God sees, God knows, God understands all of our past struggles and triumphs and wins and losses and all of that. God knows, like no one else, even better than ourselves sometimes, how we manage to carry on through even the darkest, most scary and challenging times. God also knows how our story will end in this realm of existence. As it says in Jeremiah 29, God knows the plans God has for us, to prosper us, to give us hope, to give us a future. Those are things that we often lose sight of on this side of the veil. And because God can see everything, can see the whole picture, that's a vision that includes everything that God ever has or ever will create and hold in existence by his love, his/her love. God has compassion on us, knowing that we're human. And yes, we have this annoying tendency to F things up. But the love remains. The invitation to do better is always there. The second lesson is related to the first, I think. We are now living in our own city, our own human-made city. We're trying to keep our eyes on God. We're trying to do the next right thing, whatever that is, but we are unable to see the will of God clearly and perfectly and clearly because we are blinded unknowingly by the lights of our own city. Our own light pollution prevents us from seeing everything that there is to see. The light pollution of our ego and of our fear, of our guilt and shame and every other limitation, our inability to love as completely as we ought. We think we do see things clearly, perhaps. But it's helpful to remember that we're only, even on a good day, a really good day, we're only seeing a tiny little sliver of the totality of God's plan and God's reality. This is why we need each other. We need each other so we can share our own perspectives on what that little sliver of reality looks like to us. We need each other to help us stay on track, to help us figure out if what we think we see is true or if it's just another one of those never-ending illusions that we are generating by our own inability to see beyond the lesser lights that we are always living under. Daniel chapter 12, verse 3. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever and ever. We need each other. We need to help each other. We need to allow ourselves to be helped. Pray with me. Loving, sustaining God, we come into your divine, transfiguring presence in this moment of prayer, grateful for all of the insight you have given us throughout our lives. Help us today to remember that only you can see the totality of what is real, the whole picture, even when we think we understand. Help us, too, to be humble enough to realize that our own vision is always limited by our basic humanity. Help us to open ourselves to your love. Help us to open ourselves to the guidance of other people, so that together we might combine our hearts and our minds and our insights together, doing the next right thing according to your will, according to the totality of what you see and what you need us to do. Amen. God bless you today.